Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. We got home safely from the tornado-filled Oklahoma, just in time actually to load up the family, turn around, drive over to Wabasha, Minnesota for the Dick Hiley St. Jude fundraising tournament. We went over there to support Miles, who was fishing with my brother-in-law, Scott, and just really enjoyed that whole event. That was the first time I've been there for it, and I got to tell you, it's a pretty moving event. You really feel fortunate to have the life that you have, and from that standpoint, we will be doing quite a bit more with St. Jude's in the future, so stay tuned for that. But what I wanted to talk about today was a little bit of what I was doing and what worked, what didn't work with respect to the Lake Eufaula BPT event, where I finished just outside of a check, and I'm pretty disappointed with that. You know, if you've watched the videos, I had day one recap came out, day two recap came out. Not a whole lot of fish catches in those from the standpoint of I missed a couple of fish catches. I also just didn't catch that many fish. It was a low weight tournament, one of the lowest weight tournaments I think they've ever had with MLF, with the BPT format. But I was pretty excited going into that event. I'm not going to sit here and say I felt like I could win the event necessarily, but I also felt like if things started going in the right direction, I could do pretty well. I was fishing a lot of isolated rock. It seems like the fish there really like to relate to the rock, and there's a lot of it there. I mean, it's basically an Ozark-style lake, but there's a lot of areas where you have very specific little rock clumps, you know, whether that's on a sand bank or whether it's, you know, you've got some bigger, what I call moon rock, where you get bigger bubble rock that's got a bunch of cracks and crevices in it. And I know we were kind of on the downhill side of the spawn, but there still were some fish spawning. They like to spawn around that stuff. And it just was a good area for a lot of your resident fish to live because it's some of the only cover that's around in some of the areas I was fishing. Now, the last time I was there, last year, and had a really good tournament, I ended up going up some of the rivers and fishing up some creeks, and that just wasn't going to be a player this time based on the weather conditions we had. The water came up, I don't know, 4 feet, turned really, you know, dirty in a lot of areas, and all the areas I fished in the past were blown out. So I was kind of starting from scratch, but I still had, you know, some experiences to what I was looking for. And the first day of the tournament or practice, I went out and I had, you know, I think I shook off like 20 or 25 bites, you know, really not going to say it was easy, but it was, you know, pretty good pattern. Then we got the rain that rolled through at the end of the first day of practice. Water started coming up, and the second day I stuck with the pattern, got about half the bites. And then on day 3 of practice, we had a shortened day, and I had a little less than, you know, I had a fewer bites again, but I still was getting bit where I thought I'd be able to make a go of it, especially considering most of the other pros I was talking to were talking about how difficult it was to get a bite. A lot of guys were going out getting 3-4 bites a day, and I was going out getting, you know, 10 or so bites a day. So I was feeling okay with respect to what I was doing. The problem was really that most of the anglers were pretty condensed to a handful of areas, and I feel like if you got into a bad rotation of boats, there weren't enough fish there to necessarily support boat after boat after boat going down a lot of the same areas. So that really hurt me. You know, the first day I was sitting in 11th place. I had 5 legals, total weight of like 11 and some pounds. So nothing extremely special, but again, it was decent. You know, 11 pounds, I still had a 3-pound cushion over the last check spot. I was 1 fish away from the top 10. So I felt all right. The real issue was I just didn't execute, guys. Like, I know my results don't show it, but the first day I broke off a nice fish the first day, and then the second day I had a nice fish pull off, and I broke off another nice fish. And the 2 that I broke off, you know, I don't think there's much I can do about it. I was flipping rock crevices, and, you know, you'd feel the line rolling on the rocks. I'd come back, I'd have a stretch of line that far that was just frayed, and it ultimately, you know, didn't help, you know. And of all 3 of those fish, They were all decent, good quality fish. One of the ones I broke off jumped about 6 times by the boat. It was for sure a 2.5+ pounder. Any one of those fish, I end up getting paid for the event. And if I catch all 3, I make the top 10 and I got the fish another day. But it didn't happen. So I want to talk a little bit about the baits. I really started off in practice, and I had the majority of all my action was fishing this guy right here. So I was fishing a NACO rigged Magnum hitworm, Berkeley Maxcent Magnum hitworm, just a lightly weighted NACO style bait. Now, most of the bites were coming in that 4 to 6 or 8 foot range. So a lightly weighted NACO really worked well for that. Plus, we didn't have super crazy conditions in terms of wind. The problem I ran into on the first day of the tournament was we had very windy conditions. The water was 4 feet higher, so using a lightly weighted NACO did not seem to be as productive in terms of me being able to feel the bottom. One of the keys with what I was doing was knowing that you were in the rock pile. Some of the instances I was fishing one rock. It was a sand flat with one rock, and with the wind that we had and the conditions we had on the first day, it was really tough to feel some of that. So I ended up swapping over to a couple of different baits, and this is what I caught most of the fish on. So this was a Kitech tungsten casting jig with a Berkeley 3-inch pit boss on the back, one of my go-tos for fishing around rock. So I ended up throwing that quite a bit more in the tournament, as well as a Yamamoto hula grub on a tungsten Picasso football jig head. So those 2 baits ended up doing the majority of my fish catching. So the first day of the tournament, the first bass I caught was on the Magnum hitworm, and then I proceeded to catch one. I had 1 on the hula grub, and I had 3 on the casting jig, and I broke off a fish on a casting jig. And that's 15-pound fluorocarbon, so I don't feel like I was throwing too light a line by any means. I think I could have had 30-pound and it would have come back and frayed, because a lot of the rock crevices are formed where like a big boulder splits, and the boulder might be smooth, but that split has a jagged edge on it, and that got me twice. And then the second day of the tournament, I ended up catching, I lost one on the jig to start the day off right away in the first 10 minutes. And then I broke another one off on the jig out of the rock crack. And I caught, what did I weigh? So I had one, my first keeper was actually on the core tackle swim jig, and it was a 4 1/4. I actually missed the fish catch because my camera, I was pointing towards the sky because I had just moved to a new area making a long run. But I caught it on the Goldilocks 3/8 ounce 4/0 core tackle swim jig with a Reaction Innovation skinny dipper on the back. This is the same. I've had this one tied on since last fall now. It has not left the rod. I caught a pile of fish on it at Lay Lake. Like, it's getting beaten up, but still holding up just fine. So I caught a 4.2 on that, and then shortly after that, I caught one on the casting jig, and that was it the rest of the day, other than breaking off one on the casting jig. And in hindsight, so I've watched a lot of footage on this. I've watched a lot of the live coverage, and I want to say, like, I made some mistakes. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is I had the bites to make the top 10 to qualify for the next round. I didn't execute, so that's a big thing. That's my issue. I didn't execute. Now, when watching the live, what I've noticed is a lot of guys went to fishing, your vibrating jigs, your swim jigs along the bushes and fishing docks. And, 2 things happen. Your water rises, the fish like to move to the bank, to the bushes. And you also have a lot of fish that like to stay on docks, especially floating docks, because nothing really changes for them. They might float. If they want to be 2 feet under the float, they may be 4 feet higher, but they're still 2 feet under the float and they don't have to move. So docks are generally good. The issue I have with all of this is I tried that. I tried a ton of it during practice. I tried a ton of it during the tournament, both days. I probably spent too much time trying to make it work. The area that I was fishing had steeper banks, and I thought that would be good from a bush standpoint, because if I knew where they were at on the rock piles, I didn't think they'd go far to move into the bushes or the docks that were around them. I never got it to work, so I'm a little perplexed with that. Now, the other thing that bugs me a little bit is during the second period on the second day, after I had lost one, I really struggled. I spent the whole rest of the period, never had another keeper bite in the area I was fishing. I quickly went to another cove, which is the cove I started in on the first day, and had some action on this. I had the 4 1/4. I caught a short on it as well in the back of the pocket where there was a little bit of fresh water coming in. There were bushes. Like, I'm a little disappointed in myself that I didn't put this in my hand for more time and run just the backs of the pockets. Now, I don't necessarily feel like the guys that did really well were just running backs of pockets, but I do think in the area of the lake that I was in, that may have been something that could have produced a few more bites for me. You know, it's one of those things at this point. In hindsight, it's 50-50. It is what it is, but that 4 1/4, I think, may have told me something that I didn't follow. And from that standpoint, I'm a little disappointed. But I'm not going to sit here and say I had like a bad game plan. I really feel like execution hurt me more than anything. So that was the setup. I really kept it pretty simple. You know, I think I had 5 rods on my deck for both day. I had the swim jig, I had the casting jig, I had the hula grub, and I had 2 hit worms, the Magnum hit worms. I had one that was a 3/32 of an ounce, and I had a 3/64 of an ounce nail weight. And that's what I had. So yeah, we move on to the next one. You know, I haven't checked the point standings. I need to do that to see where we're at, if they're even updated right now. But I mean, I don't think we've moved much. You know, we're probably still sitting right around where we were. 23rd isn't great. It's not terrible. It's right smack dab in the middle of the field, which is where I feel like I've been all year. Not acceptable by any means for my personal standards, but we haven't like sunk the boat either. So yeah, we move on to the next one. We get to go river fishing. Here on out, all 3 events are rivers. We got the Chowan, we got the James, and we got the St. Lawrence River. I do like rivers, so I'm looking forward to these next 3, but we do have about a month off, which is pretty nice too. So anyways, guys, I appreciate all of the support. I appreciate all of the well wishes, and stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow for you.